Most of us are learning the wrong way entirely. You feel it already, the frustration of putting in effort that doesn't match the results you're seeing. You read the book but can't retain it. You practice the skill but plateaus hit fast. You watch tutorials but don't know what actually matters. There's a reason for this. The system that taught you how to learn was designed for compliance, not mastery. And once you see how that broke your learning, you can unsee it. Here's what I want to show you. There's a framework that flips how you approach learning anything. It's not about working harder. It's about understanding how your brain actually absorbs information and building your practice around that truth instead of against it. By the end of this, you'll see why some people master a skill in months and others spend years spinning their wheels. In a minute, I'll walk you through the exact mechanism, the one thing your education completely missed. And later, I'll show you the part that changes how you think about failure itself. Let's start with what nobody talks about. You've probably heard of the 80-20th rule, the Pareto principle, that roughly 80% of your results come from 20% of your effort. But most people think it's a motivational abstraction. It's not, it's a precision tool for learning. When you're learning a language, 20% of the vocabulary accounts for 80% of daily conversation. When you're learning an instrument, 20% of the foundational techniques unlock 80% of what you'll actually play. When you're learning a new software platform for work, 20% of the features solve 80% of your real problems. The trap is obvious, but nearly universal. We chase comprehensiveness. We want to understand everything equally. We think mastery means touching every corner. It doesn't. Mastery means identifying the 20% that matters and going deep there first. And this is where it gets real. Most people learn by trying to level everything at once. A little bit of theory, a little bit of application, a little bit of advanced concepts, all tangled together. Your attention fractures. Your brain runs out of working memory trying to hold too many pieces. You feel productive because you're moving, but you're not actually consolidating anything. The mastery approach reverses this. Find the foundation first, then build. Take a scenario like learning to cook, a service-based skill where technique directly impacts results. A casual learner tries to replicate 5 different cuisines immediately. They learn 50 recipes at surface level and retain almost nothing because the fundamentals, how heat works, salt timing, knife technique, never root. A deliberate learner says, I will master grilling first, just grilling, until I can execute it without thinking. 20 hours of grilling focus, by elimination of 3 unnecessary techniques, equals mastery in 20 hours instead of 200 scattered ones. Results vary. This is the 80-20th principle. Not about working less, but about directing your effort toward the 20% that generates leverage. Now here's the twist. You know what your brain actually learns from? Failure. Not success, not instruction, not watching someone else do it. Failure. The only moment your brain updates its model of reality is the moment it predicts something and gets it wrong. This is why cramming works so poorly and why spacing out your practice works so well. When you fail to remember something 3 days after learning it, that failure rewires your memory systems more permanently than anything else could. Your brain essentially says this information matters. I was supposed to know it and didn't, so I need to store it deeper. Success teaches your brain nothing because there's no prediction error. Your brain assumes I already know this, file it away as done. But failure creates a wake-up call that consolidates memory at a neurological level. This is not intuitive. Most people think they should review material while it's fresh, immediately after learning it. That actually creates an illusion of competence. You remember the context, the feeling, the narrator's voice, not the knowledge itself. Wait 3 days, try to recall it, and you've forgotten half of it. That forgetting is the mechanisms. That gap is where learning happens. Think about this in the context of a product business, say learning inventory management software as a warehouse manager. A standard training approach, intensive 3-day boot camp, lots of hand-holding, you feel competent on day 3. 2 weeks later, you're stuck on a basic function and have to call support. A spaced learning approach, 30 minutes on day 1, then 30 minutes on day 4, then 30 minutes on day 9. Each session, you've forgotten something, you struggle, you rebuild that memory. By day 15, you actually know it. 3 sessions times 30 minutes. Plus, distributed failure equals functional expertise instead of temporary surface mastery. Results vary. The difference isn't time, it's the structure of failure over time. Most people miss this. They think learning is about accumulation, stacking information like bricks. It's actually about the rhythm of forgetting and recovering. Reset sentence. This is where your learning system should shift. Now let me introduce the actual architecture of how this works. The 4-stage loop that separates people who plateau from people who keep progressing. Stage 1. You experience failure. You attempt something and fall short. You try to remember a vocabulary word and come up blank. You attempt a golf swing and shank it. You write code and the script crashed. That failure is not a problem. It's the signal. Stage 2. You step back and reflect. You ask yourself what exactly went wrong. Was it a gap in understanding the concept? Was it a lack of practice? Was it poor timing or sequencing? This reflection is not dwelling, it's diagnosed. Stage 3. You consume targeted information. You don't just reread the whole chapter. You find the specific piece that addresses your gap. You watch a focused tutorial on that one technique. You consult the manual for that specific function. This targeted consumption is nothing like rereading or passive review. It's precision refueling. Stage 4, you iterate immediately. You go back to the attempted task and try again with your new information. Fail again, reflect again, consume again, iterate again. This is the actual loop of learning, and it's completely different from how most education structures itself. In a minute, I'll show you the cheat code that turbocharges this loop. But the last part changes everything about how you think about your own capability. Consider a property owner learning to handle rental property management, a scenario where understanding systems and compliance matter. Traditional learning: take a real estate course, learn landlord-tenant law, learn property management, get a certification. Months pass, you remember fragments. You make expensive mistakes because you didn't understand the real scenario you'd face. Loop-based learning. You try to manage the property, immediately hit a problem eviction process, late rent collection, maintenance scheduling. You research just that problem, implement a solution, document what worked. Next month, you hit another problem, maybe insurance claims, and repeat. 12 months of looped failures versus 6-month classroom learning. Equal sign mastery plus scars. You actually learn from results vary. The classroom teaches you information in abstract. The loop teaches you judgment because it teaches you context. Most people never realize this difference. They assume that learning and education are synonymous. They're not. Education is often just the beginning of learning, and it can be the shallowest beginning at that. Within this loop lives a psychological technique that accelerates everything. It's called active recall, and it's the single most documented cheat code in cognitive science. Here's how it works in practice. You finish reading a chapter or watching a tutorial. Instead of immediately moving to the next chapter, you close the material. You ask yourself, what were the 3 main points? What did I just learn about how this works? Why would someone use this instead of the alternative I learned last week? Can I explain this to someone with no background in this? You struggle to answer these questions. That struggle, that inability to produce the answer smoothly, is the cheat code activated. Your brain recognizes the gap between I just heard this and I can recall this, and that gap drives consolidation. Then you go back and reread or rewatch, but now you're reading with a purpose, filling the exact gaps you discovered. This is the opposite of passive review. In a software-heavy business context, imagine learning a coding framework as an engineer. Passive approach: read the documentation top to bottom, watch video tutorials, bookmark key sections, feel competent. 3 weeks later, you're building something and can't remember the syntax or the logic flow. Active recall approach: read the documentation, then immediately try to build something without referencing it. Fail, struggle, look back at specific sections to fill the gap. Try building again. 10 hours of active recall practice times immediate application pressure equals functional knowledge instead of conceptual familiarity. Results vary. The person using active recall spends less total time but learns faster because every minute is targeted at real retrieval gaps. Most people avoid this because it feels less efficient. You're failing more, not flowing smoothly through material. That feeling is the indicator that you're doing it right. Comfort in learning is often a sign you're not learning. Here's the counterintuitive principle that most people get backwards. By learning more slowly, you actually learn quicker overall. This sounds like a paradox until you understand what slowly actually means. It doesn't mean leisurely or casual. It means depth before breadth. It means mastering one progression before moving to the next. Let's say you're learning a musical instrument, which is a long-term skill-building scenario. Typical path: learn 5 songs simultaneously. Practice a little bit of each daily. Switch between them to stay interested. After 6 months, you can play fragments of 5 songs, but you can play any of them. Well, your technique is scattered because you haven't internalized any fundamental muscle memory or finger patterns. Deep path: learn one song completely, not perfectly, but completely playable and with solid technique, then move to the next song, which reinforces the first song's technique, while adding one new element. Then the third song, which now builds on the first 2. 6 months of focused progression versus 6 months of scattered variety. Equal sign: you're playing 5 songs. Well, instead of 5 songs poorly. Results vary case. This is not about talent or passion. This is about how neural pathways actually consolidate skills. Distributed attention prevents consolidation. Focused attention and progressive difficulty create it. Pay attention to this part. Most people feel they should be learning more things simultaneously because our culture celebrates multitasking and range, but multitasking is not learning multiple skills faster. It's learning multiple skills slower because you're preventing consolidation in each one. The fastest path to range is actually sequential depth. Get very good at one thing, then move to the next, and you'll find they start to connect because they share foundational principles. Now here's where the last piece locks everything into place. All of this, the 80-20ths rule, the failure loop, active recall, depth-first learning, none of it works without one thing: the mindset that you can actually get better. This is growth mindset, and it's less fluffy than it sounds. It's not positive thinking. It's a specific belief structure about what failure means and what effort produces. People with a fixed mindset view their abilities as static. I'm not a math person. I'm not musical. I'm not good at learning languages. These aren't observations. They're identity foreclosure. They prevent you from even attempting the 4-stage loop, because if you fail, it confirms the negative identity rather than indicating a gap to fill. People with a growth mindset view their abilities as developmental. I haven't learned this yet. I'm early in the learning curve here. This requires more deliberate practice than I've put in. Same failure, completely different interpretation. One interpretation shuts down learning. The other interprets failure as information that just launched the loop. And this is where the whole system reveals its purpose. The rule isn't really about deductions or optimization tricks. It's about timing and documentation. Actually, let me reframe that for this context. The principle isn't about rigid rules or techniques. It's about building a system that respects how your brain actually functions versus how you assumed it did. When you understand the 80-20ths principle, you're not just learning faster. You're training yourself to think like someone who understands leverage. When you understand that failure is the learning mechanism, you're not just tolerating setbacks. You're training yourself to interpret struggle as data. When you understand active recall, you're not just memorizing better. You're training yourself to distinguish between familiarity and true knowledge. When you understand depth-first learning, you're not just progressing slower in some domain. You're training yourself to recognize that perceived slowness is actually where consolidation happens. And when you operate from growth mindset, you're not just being optimistic. You're training yourself to see every failure as a training signal rather than a verdict on who you are. The system compounds because these principles interact. Depth-first learning forces you into the failure loop more intentionally. Active recall within the failure loop accelerates the reflection stage. 80-20ths thinking lets you choose which 20% to learn deeply. First, growth mindset keeps you from quitting when the loop inevitably produces struggle. One person I know who runs a manufacturing business learned to do the work himself before hiring, and he deliberately forced himself into the learning loop on the machines he least understood. "I'm not good with this one," he said, "so I'll start there." 3 months of looped practice on the equipment he initially thought was beyond him, and he became the person in his shop who could troubleshoot it fastest. He didn't get more talented. He changed how he framed the struggle. 3 months of deliberate looped practice plus growth mindset about the specific gap equals mastery in the one area he thought he couldn't master. Results vary. This is the pattern. The people who master skills aren't necessarily smarter or more naturally talented. They're the ones who got the learning architecture right and then refused to quit when the architecture produced discomfort. Here's what to hold on to from all of this. First, the 80-20th rule means you can stop trying to learn everything equally and start identifying the 20% that creates 80% of the value in your domain. That clarity alone accelerates everything because you're no longer dispersing attention. Second, failure is your primary learning signal, not a sign you should stop or that you lack ability. The loop of failing, reflecting, consuming targeted information, and iterating is the actual architecture of learning. Third, this means depth before breadth. One focused progression before spreading to the next, because that's how your brain actually consolidates neural pathway. Most of us got taught the opposite, and we're still running that outdated program. If you want to actually close the gap between effort and results, you need to close this gap between how you were taught to learn and how your brain actually learns. That's not a minor adjustment. That's the foundation shift that changes everything.